Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Blazers Edge podcast, part of SB Nation's network of podcasts, also found on the Almighty Baller podcast network. I am your co-host, Dan Meringue. As always, I am joined by Team Mom, Tara Bowen Biggs. Team Mom, how are we doing this week?
Well, it's been quite a change. I now have my hoodie on because the weather has cooled down. So I'm ready. I think I'm ready for the season. So, Dan, we have been making our way through the Western Conference doing division previews. Today, we have our third and final Western Conference division preview. And to do that, we have brought in a special guest. I'm happy to introduce everyone to Aimee Stiegemeyer. She's the founding editor and co-owner of All Heart in Hoop City, which is a Memphis Grizzlies blog. It's the first and only NBA site run by women, and their mission is to create original content from a unique perspective. So we are really excited to have you on the show, Aimee. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
How have things been going for the Grizzly fans this offseason?
Yeah, that's kind of a painful question. I mean, obviously, this is going to be a Grizzlies team that looks a lot different in this coming season. And I think there's even more than just, as basketball players. Zach Randolph and Tony Allen were pretty much beloved in the city of Memphis. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of mourning that a little bit. I know a lot of other fans are sort of the same way. And it's going to be weird, I guess, because like so much of what people associate with Memphis Grizzlies basketball kind of came about specifically because of Zach Randolph and Tony Allen, and a playing style and a mentality. Obviously all of those things are going to change with them being gone. It's just, I'm trying to prepare myself for the possibility that Memphis might be really bad this season, and I hope nobody gets mad at me for saying that. And I hope I didn't. I'm going to knock on my desk now. I hope I didn't just.
It sounds like you're not even talking so much about the team being bad, but like it losing its identity.
I guess it's an image thing, but it's also very much a style of play. Like, Zach Randolph is a fabulous, dominant low post player. Memphis plays at one of the slowest paces in the league. And I know that that's something, David Fizdale and his staff have been trying to kind of adapt more to the way that the league is going. Everybody, needs a team. Everybody's team needs somebody that can shoot 3-pointers. That's, not having someone that can reliably shoot 3-pointers has been, or even really decent shooting has been a huge thorn in the side of the Grizzlies for years. The fact that David Fizdale got Marcus Gasol shooting threes last season was, is fantastic. And, and Mike Conley is amazing. And God, I hope he gets to be an all-star this year just because he deserves it so much.
Maybe, Dan, you can talk about what Zach Randolph meant to the Blazers when he was here, and then we can talk about how things may have changed.
Zach has always been an incredibly talented player, whether it was at Michigan State, in Portland, New York, Memphis, and now Sacramento. His game has been one that was kind of ageless, timeless, however you want to describe it, because it didn't rely on athleticism. It relied on his size, his rather large rear end, his positioning, and his basketball IQ. And those are all things that just got better and better with age. Literally all of them, including his rear end. It got bigger and rounder. I mean, he just carved out more space with it. That's just what he did. And the fact that he didn't rely on his athleticism allowed him to hone, incredible footwork. I mean, anybody who's ever listened to me talk about big men in the NBA, my favorite thing to watch for is feet work. His is immaculate. He's a 300-pound ballerina. The problem with him early in his career was always a mentality issue. and whether it was he didn't feel comfortable with where he was, with his teammates or within the community or a host of other things. There were a lot of negatives along the way before he got to Memphis. The basketball stuff was always there, but I think it really culminated and came together when the on the court and off the court stuff all came together in one. And that was culminated in Memphis and really solidified by Tony Allen, the grindfather, bringing that mentality and that mindset, and Zach being the perfect yin to Tony Allen's yang.
I guess for lack of a better way to say it, I recall some of the troubles you were talking about with Zach off the court when he was in Portland. And it's like when he came to Memphis, I couldn't identify what exactly changed that, but you could see it on the court, off the court, and I do think it made a huge difference. And obviously, he was in Memphis for 8 years, and so there's a lot of love from the fan base. But he did so much in the community here too, and I think there was a lot of narrative around. He came to Memphis and, kind of straightened up. And I guess to a large degree that's what he did. And I don't know if it was an age thing, if it was just, him growing up literally, or if it was the change of scenery or what. But I recall some of what you were talking about as far as, how he was perceived in Portland versus when he came here. And he pretty much completely turned his image, I guess, as a person, not so much as a player, if that makes sense.
I just love a story when somebody finds the fit and everything falls into place, not just the basketball, but just the fit into the community. And I'm really glad that he had so much success in Memphis. We'll see what happens in Sacramento. Well, we have a lot to cover. We have 5 teams that we want to talk about today. So if you guys are okay, maybe we'll just dive into getting to know the Southwest Division. Let's jump in and start off by talking about the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks last year, their record was 33-49. They finished 11th in the Western Conference. They are projected to win by ESPN 34.6 games this year. They added a bunch of rookies: PJ Dozier, Dennis Smith Jr., Jonathan Motley. They've also added Josh McRoberts and Jeff Withey to the team. They don't have, in my idea, a whole bunch of key losses. Nicholas Brusinio, AJ Hammonds, DeAndre Liggins, and Jared Utoff. No big names really jump out as far as losses go. But when I look at the Dallas roster, I'm like, what the heck is going on? So what do y'all think about the strengths for the Mavericks?
They did get I'm trying to remember. They did get Nerlens Noel back, I think, on the him picking up the qualifying offer. I think he's going to be good. Whether or not I think the moves that they've made, they added Harrison Barnes last year, and then Noel, and then you said that they brought in a whole score of young guys. I'm not sure if I think that's going to make them immediately better. So
you think they're in it for the long game, like a lot of people teams in the Western Conference?
Everybody's trying to wait out the Warriors now. I think that's part of it, and I think I'm not sure what's Dirk's gonna play another year, and I guess how he plays. He's still a huge part of that team.
I think he said the other day he's got years in him.
Hey, Vince Carter still has years in him, so I believe Dirk does too.
That's true.
I'm not gonna down that because I have that respect, but I don't think they did enough. I guess made enough changes to really move that needle much. Like they'll probably miss the playoffs again this season, if I had to guess.
Especially in this tough conference. Dan, what do you think about Dallas this year?
I mean, when you look at the Mavericks, they've got 2 of the best veterans in the league in Dirk and Wes Matthews. 2 guys who know what it takes to get it done and have delivered throughout their career. You mix that with guys like Harrison Barnes, Dennis Smith Jr., Nerlens Noel. So you've got this great mix of young and old. So yeah, they're a team that's looking forward past the Warriors and their cycle and building young. Harrison Barnes is still young. Nerlens Noel is young. Dennis Smith Jr., obviously a rookie, is young. Those are going to be their core building blocks if they can keep Nerlens Noel under contract next year. But more than anything for this year, I think they're just going to be a fun team. Dennis Smith Jr. and Josh Jackson, those are the two guys that I have pegged for Rookie of the Year. I think those are the two guys that are really going to battle it out. I think Dennis Smith Jr. is going to be the guy that's going to look a lot like Damian Lillard did in his rookie year. He's going to put up some crazy numbers. He's their franchise right now. There's no doubt about it. Dirk is still their guy, but I almost guarantee that Mark Cuban and Dirk have had the discussion like, hey, let's get the young fellow the ball. He's the future of the franchise. I'm going to still do my thing as Dirk. I'm going to get you 18.7 rebounds. I'm going to shoot damn near 50, 40, 90 from all over the floor, but he's the guy. I think Dirk is of the mindset that he's far enough along in his career where that's not going to be an issue. Wes is a consummate pro. I think Harrison Barnes knows who he is now as a player. I mean, he's a 20.5 rebound, 5 assist kind of guy when I think he's utilized best. But it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit to see somebody like Dennis Smith Jr. put up 18 to 20 and 7, like having a really monster rookie year that for any other player at any other position, we'd be like, man, that's an all-star campaign. But the point guard depth is so ridiculous in the league right now, particularly even in the conference, that it's not going to, be crazy, but he's going to have one heck of a season. If you had to sum up the Mavericks, they're a lot like the Kings in my sense, where they're just going to be a fun team to watch. I don't think they're really a threat to do anything, but seeing how their younger players develop and how they mix with the veteran players, that's the most exciting part of this for me. And I think they're on the right path as far as the rebuild goes, as long as they don't throw down a ton of money on mid-tier free agents, as we've seen in Portland, what that can do to your rebuilding.
I think it's interesting that you brought up the Sacramento Kings because I think one interest, I agree, there's so many young guys who we're going to just see what they bring to the table, that it's going to be interesting to watch them. But one thing that I see is different is their established veterans at Dallas have been there all along, and Dirk is the franchise, and Wesley is somebody who's very established in the league and has been with the team for a couple of years now. Whereas in Sacramento, they imported from Memphis
Memphis West.
Imported their veterans
after they imported Matt Barnes last year. Dave Yeager, who was the Memphis head coach before he went to Sacramento.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought about that. There's a pipeline there.
Yeah, no, it really is Memphis West.
When the Grizzlies play the Kings, it's going to be it's going to be an interesting game to watch for many reasons.
That's going to be tough. Well, do we want to add anything else about Dallas before we move on to New Orleans, which I think is a fascinating case? Who wants to start off about talking about New Orleans? Dan, you want to?
Go ahead, please. I'm going to hush.
Go ahead, please. New Orleans is this... I don't even know how to describe it. Clearly, there's an abundance of talent in just Anthony Davis and Boogie. I mean, just those two, you look at what they've done through their careers, and it's astounding, just the statistical numbers. Whether or not those two can stay healthy and produce together on the floor at the same time in positions that may or may not make them the most successful is another question. The other, huge question here is whether or not they can figure out what's going on at the wing position. Like, they don't have a wing. There's nobody on this team. I mean, the way that they're set up right now, it looks like Drew Holiday could get some time at the 2 and maybe even the 3. Their roster is just so goofy with how they're set up, and I really don't know how to describe it other than that. There's certainly potential for them to be a nightmare for teams to cover. But, I mean, I don't understand how adding a guy like, Rajon Rondo to the team is a good idea. I mean, it's like, you know what? We've got this giant pile of dynamite. Let's go ahead and, throw it in the dryer. No, like, let's just throw it in the dryer and let it tumble for a bit and see what happens. I mean, that's... I get that Boogie and Rondo are Kentucky guys, but not all Kentucky guys are the same. And this is, if nothing else, it's going to be a really interesting experiment to watch because there's at least an 80% chance that this blows up in somebody's face.
Hey, I forgot to run by real quick what their record was and their wins and losses. So let's do that and continue on. Their record last year, they were 34 and 48th. They were 10th in the Western Conference. They lost Quinn Cook, former Blazer great Tim Frazier, Donatas Montejunas, Quincy Pondexter, or did they re-sign Quincy?
No, they traded him to Chicago.
They did, okay. And Axel Tupain. They added Tony Allen, Charles Cook, a rookie, Frank Jackson, a rookie, Jalen Jones, a rookie, Perry Jones, Darius Miller, and Rajon Rondo. So those are the key additions and subtractions. Aimee, what's your thoughts on the Pelicans this year?
The Pelicans, to me, are sort of like the Mr. Potato Head that's kind of put together wonky with parts that aren't quite right, because there's a serious amount of basketball, of just pure basketball talent on that team. And I would love for like half a season to see Anthony Davis on a team that's not going to suck. See really what he's capable of. But yeah, the way that they put all, it's a bunch of guys who have talent, but they don't really, I can't, the Mr. Potato Head analogy is really the best I have every time I think about the Pelicans.
They have eyes, they have arms.
Just about where they're put at. Yeah, it's a little bit strange.
What do you think Tony Allen is going to bring to the team?
Tony Allen thing, if I can get a trademark on that, I want to put a trademark on that. Somebody else on Grizz Twitter will probably roast me for saying that, but nobody else has said they were going to trademark it, so I will. Tony still, is a great defender. He's, but let's be honest, he's never been the greatest offensive player. He has had very good offensive games, but he also is the guy that does the stuff like take the ill-advised three at the beginning of the shot clock. And, there was a kind of a joke about, trick or treat Tony Allen and which one you were going to get. And his defensive capabilities would be a big boon for New Orleans. I think him and Rondo were in Boston together. I'm digging my brain here to think back some years. If you look at all the personalities on that team, and Tony Allen is definitely a personality. I mean, he's going to give them some defensive minutes. Whether or not he gives them a whole lot of offensive contribution, probably not. But it doesn't really look like they just based on what the team is constructed of, that they really have a very cohesive roster playing whatever. I guess they're just going to start plugging people in and see who goes where.
See what happens. How do you think that he'll play off against the big guys down in New Orleans? Will it be? I assume it'll be a big difference for him. Moving from playing with Gasol and Randolph to going and playing with some guys who are much younger, who maybe are somewhat representative of the new type of NBA. How do you think how do you think he can help Boogie and Anthony Davis?
Honestly, I really him doing the things that he does well, doing them well, keeping his head together on and off the court. I mean, I love Tony Allen, and I think he's a great guy, and I think his defensive abilities are going to be a big asset to the Pelicans. Again, whether or not I think him in conjunction with the other guys that they have on the team. I don't necessarily think Tony Allen is going to be what gets them to make the playoffs this year.
It's so odd because they have pieces that people want. People would love to have Anthony Davis. Let's see, who else do people want? I don't know. Maybe I said that a little too soon. Dan, what do you think?
I mean, I've always loved Jrue Holiday. I think he's a fantastic player, and what he's been through recently is just crazy. With off the court with his family,
The baby just turned 1, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, so
by the
which
way.
is an awesome story.
Drew and Lauren's holiday baby. Happy birthday to their baby, their 1-year-old.
Like I said, they have some amazing pieces. There's no wing creation on this team. You sign a guy like Drew Holiday to, that kind of a big money deal, and then you bring in Rondo. I don't understand what they're like. Is the NBA still running this franchise? Is that what's going on here? Because the decisions being made are just they're crazy. I mean, I don't know how to quantify it any other way than that. It's just there's no rhyme or reason. Like the Boogie deal made sense. I mean, they got him for pennies on the dollar for what everybody expected. That was great. And then everything beyond that, you're sitting there like, okay, now what? You're struggling for a wing, and whether or not Pondexter was going to play or whether injury was going to continue to be a problem, you dump him off to Chicago, and it's like I don't understand exactly what's going on with what way are they going other than, hey, we have AD, Boogie, and Drew Holiday. Like beyond that, they're like, okay, let's just literally throw it on the wall and see what sticks. And I don't think somebody like Rajon Rondo or even Tony Allen sticks. It's just a weird situation.
I mean, I'm trying to think of it like logically. Okay, so a lot of people in the Western Conference are in the situation right now where they're not trying to win the championship this year because of so many other just amazingly strong teams in front of them. So they're either building around young players like Dallas, or I guess the other option might be that they're amassing assets that they can turn into something when the time is right and when it. And I was wondering if maybe that's what the Pelicans were doing, because I mean, Anthony Davis is an asset until he's gone. I guess he has like 3 or 4 more years on his long-term deal. He's making a lot of money. DeMarcus might be just gone. I mean, they just signed Dante Cunningham, and I'm just looking at their roster going, I'm not sure how many of these I call a lot of assets that would command a lot on the market.
They don't command a lot for your team either. That you're not getting like a ton of production out of these guys either. That's what I don't understand. It's almost like the Pelicans decided they were going to bring the old King stupidity along with DeMarcus Cousins. Like, we're just going to go ahead and like, we're going to get Cousins and then throw random pieces around him. Like, they're only doing slightly better because they already had AD and Holiday, which is more than can be said for any of the players that were around Cousins while he was in Sacramento. So I really don't understand what it is they're doing. Are you trying to get good now and compete and build a franchise, or are you trying to, tank and build around that? You can't. They're putting themselves in the worst possible position. And that's kind of the position that a lot of other teams have found themselves in. And that's that mediocre position where you aren't getting better, you aren't getting worse, you're not getting draft picks, and it's just. I don't know. It's this NBA purgatory that I don't wish upon any kind of franchise.
And Anthony Davis is just wasting away.
And that's the worst part of it, right? You've got one of the most transcendent players in the entire league who's just stuck there putting up 27-12 every night.
Like, and seriously, how good would he be? Would he be on a different team? And why the hell are the Pelicans not like? Either you build around this guy or he's your asset to start over.
Well, we could spend a whole hour talking about trying to figure out what's going on in New Orleans, and I don't think we're really going to get anywhere because I don't know that anybody knows where the Pelicans are going. So how about we move on and talk about your Memphis Grizzlies next? 43-39 last year, finished 7th in the Western Conference. This year they're projected to win 34.6. Somewhat of a drop. They lost Tony Allen, Vince Carter, Zach Randolph. Did they also lose JaMychal Green, or has he just not been re-signed yet?
What I've heard is they expect him to sign, like they've given him a qualifying offer.
And they're waiting.
Yes.
Okay.
From what I've heard, nobody really handled his free agency situation very well. I hope that they work out whatever it is. I mean, even if it's just, he's here for a year and then goes into free agency again next summer. Because, I mean, if, Zach's gone and if they don't re-sign JaMychal Green, Are we just not going to have a power forward at all? Is that not a thing that the Grizzlies are going to do? I don't know, and I'm not really prepared for them to be a lottery team, and I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. Gasol and Conley are fantastic basketball players. Chandler Parsons can be a fantastic basketball player. Whether or not.
Yeah, how is Chandler?
Never been so happy somebody leveraged Portland than was Chandler Parsons.
God. He better play so well. For as much as I have defended him, the thing about Chandler Parsons and Memphis and that whole what happened last offseason was a big offseason. They re-signed Mike Conley. Last summer was the summer that the cap took that big jump, and so everybody made money.
Oh, nobody paid players like Portland did.
And before Parsons decided to sign with Memphis, Portland tried to pay Parsons. In fact, Parsons used Portland to leverage a bigger contract with Memphis. So thanks for taking that bullet for us.
Alan Crabb.
I don't know who you're talking about. I'm looking at Portland's roster right now, and I don't see an Alan Crabb.
Well, so actually, you said that you've been defending Chandler Parsons. So, what is it that you? What are the positives that you're hoping that will all come to fruition this season with him?
I think Chandler's going to have, or I hope his contract is going to be a lot like Vince Carter's was. In Vince Carter's first season, he had a bone spur surgery in the offseason when he signed with Memphis, and so that first season wasn't great, and then he kind of in the next two seasons he progressively got better, and I think that's what we're going to see with Chandler Parsons, partly because I'm not sure it's possible for him to do let me not say that let me not word it like that because I will jinx. Chandler Parsons had a bad season in Memphis last year, and a lot of the fan base and a lot of the local sports guys too. I'll say that, I don't care. Really kind of dug into him in a personal way because, Memphis gave him all this money.
That paycheck.
And that's not necessarily his fault, and something that I've talked about with another friend of mine who's a Grizzlies fan. There's a good chance that Mike Conley doesn't stay if they don't put someone with him. And I think, Robert Parra and the Grizzlies shelling out for Chandler Parsons and Mike Conley's new contract and bringing in David Fizdale and everybody David Fizdale brought in kind of showed that they were serious about, filling in the spaces to try and to keep Memphis, a contending playoff team. Obviously the first year of the Chandler Parsons experiment didn't go the way that anybody wanted it to go, but there was, just a huge amount of social media, personal scrutiny, and just really, I feel like in these situations, to talk about what a player does or doesn't produce on the court is fair, but to kind of go beyond that and the bottom line is, okay, so you're mad this guy's getting a huge paycheck and he's not contributing to the team. Well, that's life. Get over it. Not, I don't know, the way I've seen, I don't think social media really brings out the best in everybody.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
And to be fair, Parsons has also probably earned some of that flack. And I really honestly just hope that he has rehabbed the hell out of himself and he comes and has a monster year. Otherwise,
that's a hard one to shake if it doesn't turn out.
Yeah, nobody's going to take that contract, and the Grizzlies really have no cap space at this point with having, they've got Gasol's contract and Conley's contract, and then, Parsons' big check, which doesn't really leave them a lot of room to add in anybody else. But one thing that was significant about bringing in Chandler Parsons was he is the first real big name free agent that Memphis has been able to attract. Obviously, everybody wishes that his season had been better, but I think the way that he was treated by the fan base doesn't necessarily make Memphis is probably not the most attractive NBA destination for top name free agents. So, people could stand to be a little more welcoming if they want to try and get more people to want to come and, more good players to want to come and play basketball here.
So as far as new players on the Grizzlies, you do have several new rookies, and then in addition, so including Dylan Brooks, Vince Hunter, Jeremy Morgan, Kobe Simmons. And then there's a few other guys who've been added to the roster: Mario Chalmers, Tyreek Evans, Ben McLemore. Who among the new people on the roster are people most interested in or talking about as far as being an impact?
Mario Chalmers is actually returning to Memphis, and I've always been a big Chalmers fan since he came to Memphis, and then he, was out last season. He tore his Achilles tendon at the end of that horrible season where that Grizzlies team had no business making the playoffs, and getting swept by the Spurs in the first round was a mercy killing. It really was. I mean, Mark was hurt, Mike was hurt, Tony was hurt. It was literally Zach Randolph, Matt Barnes, and Vince Carter that drugged them the rest of and a handful of, more than a handful, because they went through, it was like a league record. They had 27 players on the roster. Of course, Ben McLemore got hurt in some off-season training and had surgery on his foot a couple of weeks ago, and he's probably not going to be.
Sounds like things are pretty. People are a little bit on edge about wondering what's going to happen with the Memphis Grizzlies coming up this season. Dan, what are your thoughts on how the Grizzlies could, surprise folks and maybe come out more than 34 wins? Or do you think that sounds about right?
It sounds about right, to be honest. I love Mike Conley and I love Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol is probably one of my favorite players in the entire league right now because he does everything. There's very, very few players, particularly that position, where you're like, I'm not sure if putting him in that position is a good idea. He can, hedge and push out on pick and rolls defensively on the perimeter. He's a fantastic rim protector. He can play in the pick and roll himself, on the pick and pop, on the pick and roll. He can
play in the pick and roll himself, like he can pick and roll his own stuff.
He could if he wanted to. He's got a fantastic handle. He's among big men, among true big men, he's probably got one of the best handles in the league. He is the preeminent passer right now, and Jokic is obviously challenging for that crown from the high post among big men, and has been for the past few years. The high post offense that the Grizzlies have run for, ever since Gasol got there has been predicated on his passing ability and his ability to create for others in that range. Conley is perennially on the all underrated team. Probably the best pure two-way point guard in the league, not named Chris Paul. So, but again, we're talking about the theme of this entire division is where are the wings? There's no wing help on this team. And that's always been Memphis' Achilles heel, but that can be covered up by superb defense from guys like Tony Allen, Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, but it was buoyed in scoring by Zach Randolph getting 15, 16 a night, JaMychal Green coming in and pitching in, Vince Carter coming in and pitching in. It was done by committee. If Chandler Parsons is healthy, yeah, that's a boon for them. But when has Chandler Parsons ever been healthy? If I'm a Grizzlies fan on the outside looking in, I'm just not counting on him contributing a whole lot. If you get 65 games out of him, that's a win. That's really what they're looking at. So for them, if they finish anywhere above 37, 38 wins, that to me is overachieving. They're just missing too many pieces right now. And they were a fantastic team there for 6-7 years, but they just could never get past the Spurs. And that's not really a knock. You couldn't get past basically the most dominant franchise in NBA history. That's just what it is. So it's not like it's a terrible thing. And Portland went through this. It's almost the exact same thing Portland went through in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they just couldn't get past the Lakers. So, I mean, honestly, it mimicked a lot of similarities between the two and how they're constructed and how they looked and how they stood among the elite in the NBA. Because there was a 2 or 3 year period right there where a lot of people were like, well, you know what? Memphis is probably a dark horse to make it to the Western Conference Finals, maybe even to the finals. But they just couldn't stay healthy or couldn't make something happen at just the right time to have it all come together. And I think, it's sad as it is to say, I think we're witnessing the downfall of Memphis. And honestly, I hope things go well, but I don't see them really able to rebound without a whole lot of pieces to build around.
I wish I could say that I had reason to disagree with that assessment, but I don't. And that's sad. Everything that you said about Marc Gasol, I'm just going to hold up a that sign because that's all there and all true and on point. I will say that I will forever maintain in 2015, if Mike Conley did not get his face broken by C.J. McCollum, having a different conversation right now.
On the most random play I think I've ever seen.
I joke about about being salty at C.J. McCollum about that, and I'm not. I mean, that obviously wasn't like a purposeful thing. It was just weird freak thing that happened. Turned out to be kind of gnarly.
Yeah, to give you an idea of what I thought of it when it first happened, I thought Conley flopped trying to draw a foul. Because it was so innocuous, and it was like, oh, that's not a big deal. And then he stayed down.
And then he got up and had a giant dent in his face.
Oh my God! Did somebody hit him with a titanium pole? I mean, it was just, that was one of the weirdest things I've ever. And you're probably right, and that's kind of the NBA in a nutshell. For one fortuitous or awful circumstance, for one franchise over another. What's crazy is that how that went for Memphis and how devastating that was. That was also kind of for Portland. I know this sounds awful, but it was a series where Myers Leonard and C.J. McCollum kind of came to the forefront and showed that they could be something more for Portland. That was C.J.'s really big time coming out party. So it was a really strange situation with how that series played out for both franchises, and I think. For both, instead of like elevating one or dropping the other, both franchises just kind of plateaued.
Yeah, Memphis is, they've been the 7th seed the last 2 seasons. To paraphrase George Orwell, imagine a vision of the future is the Spurs in the first round every year. Because they've had this past year wasn't as awful. I mean, they still lost the series, but they at least won a couple of games, and they were really good showing. Last season, the Spurs are a good team. They're a great team, and when we're not playing them, I kind of watch them. But I really I want to find a silver lining for Memphis here, and I hate to sound like Eeyore, but I'm not really sure there is one. I really don't this. Really, may be the year that the wheels fall off, so to speak. And I hate to say that because obviously I really don't want the team to be bad, but looking at pretty much what's left on their roster, I was obviously my ideal off season for the Grizzlies was for them to pretty much just bring everybody back, and not really even for nostalgia purposes, but because Tony Allen and Vince Carter and Zach Randolph were all players that still contributed to the sort of basketball that the Grizzlies played and were good at. Zach had a monster year last year. And without that, I guess we're going to see a lot of small ball play, and historically that's not been a strong suit for Memphis either. So
it's okay. Embrace the suck.
We got 2 more teams to get through. So if y'all are okay, I'm going to move us on. The next team is the Houston Rockets. The Rockets last year finished 55-27. They were 3rd in the Western Conference. Are projected to win 55 again this year. They lost Patrick Beverley, Bobby Brown, Sam Decker, Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams, and Kyle Wiltshire. They added Tariq Black, Demetrius Jackson, Sean Long, Luke Mbah-a-Moute, Cameron Oliver's a rookie, Chris Paul, Zhu Kui is a rookie, Jiangjing Guan. I do
Guang
not
Hee.
know how to pronounce
Guang
his last.
Hee.
Thank you. Thank you. Guang Hee. Former Blazer great Tim Quarterman and PJ Tucker are round out the additions for the Houston Rockets. So the big question with the Houston Rockets is obviously how are Chris Paul and James Harden going to play together? I was looking at the depth chart of the Houston Rockets, and what struck me when looking at it is they are thin in point guards, unless they're, I guess, planning on using James Harden as the backup. I don't know. So I'm throwing it to you guys. What are strengths of the Houston Rockets?
I mean, it's a two-pronged attack. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be Chris Paul, James Harden, and them running it down your throat. And then everybody else plays defense.
Are they going to have a backup point guard, or is James Harden going to play backup point guard?
Harden's going to be that guy. I think they're going to run it just like they do in Portland. When Chris Paul's off the floor, James Harden's handling the ball. They've got a bunch of guys that they can move around at all the other positions. They've got Trevor Ariza. They've got PJ Tucker. Those are two guys that you can play 2, 3, or 4. I mean, if you really want to. You still have Eric Gordon, and Eric Gordon can even handle the ball a bit. So, I mean, if you're putting him in a pinch, if he can stay healthy again, Eric Gordon's another guy that you can run the ball through. It's not exactly the best idea, as his assist rate is usually one of the lowest for his position, but he's a guy that in college at least created well enough at Indiana to where if pushed into emergency duty, he can make something happen. They've also got Demetrius Jackson, who can come in and, again, be an emergency kind of guy to fill in. But, I mean, this team is going to be a really interesting experiment for two of the most ball-dominant players in the NBA. Chris Paul has to have the ball to be effective. Now, James Harden has to have the ball to be the most effective. That's two totally different things. Harden has played off-ball both in Oklahoma City and in Houston. Chris Paul has never played off-ball. Chris Paul is the ball. There's no player in the NBA who needs the ball more than Chris Paul. So what does that do? Does that diminish James Harden's effectiveness? I mean, Russell Westbrook needs the ball, but that still found a way to work when Westbrook, Durant, and Harden were together. How that's going to work in Houston with Chris Paul, who has never had to give up the ball. Every team even Blake Griffin is a fantastic creator on his own. Great high post passer, can drive and dish. They still didn't do that with the Clippers. So you've got the second most creative player in the league in James Harden. And you're going to take the ball out of his hands. I have a hard time seeing how that's going to work really effectively. But it seems like the last few years, every time I question the Rockets, they find a way to make something happen and get a whole hell of a lot better. So I'm not really betting against them. But at the same time, Chris Paul has never, been out of the second round of the playoffs. So, yeah. It's kind of.
Will this be the year?
I feel like his bad juju is going to outweigh the Rockets' success over the past few years. So they're going to be good. They're going to win a lot of games. They're probably going to be a really fun team to watch. But I think there's definitely a good chance for some volatile stuff to pop up here with two massive egos and two guys that really need the ball a ton. So we'll see how it plays out.
I think it's going to be fascinating to watch them. The thing that scares me the most about Houston is the addition of Luke Mbah-a-Moute. I think he's such a good defensive player. And, they lost Patrick Beverley. But, Dan, you've talked a lot about how Patrick Beverley is a lot of movement, but not necessarily
Well, they replaced the second dirtiest player in the league with the dirtiest player in the league at the same position. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Chris Paul is the dirtiest player in the league. He grabs, holds, trips.
I thought you were talking about Mbah-a-Moute.
No. Mbah-a-Moute just gets it done. No, CP3, I love him. I love Chris Paul as a player. Always have, always will. This does not. And I would take him in a second in Portland if they didn't have Lillard. There's something about the old adage: if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I mean, Chris Paul embraces that. He grabs, he holds, he pushes, he flops, he yells, he screams. He does every single thing if he didn't write the dirty play handbook, he was at least there as a co-author or at least some editorial decisions. I mean, that dude has been there, done that. I mean, I can't think of anything dirty that's ever. The only thing I think Chris Paul hasn't done, and I'm trying to remember, is the Draymond Green, the groin kick. And I think he's even got one of those in his book. But otherwise, he's done everything else. So losing Beverly, the guy who's normally going to be that guy, and replacing him with a bigger jerk, they won that one. And then you had a guy like PJ Tucker with Trevor Ariza and Mbah Moute, that can lock you down. If Mbah Moute could knock down threes, they could run a lineup out there that defensively would just be a nightmare sans Harden that could just shoot from everywhere. Because Tucker can knock down threes. Ariza can knock down threes. Obviously, Harden and Chris Paul can knock down threes. So there's a chance that they can throw some lineups out there that can really screw with you as far as how much pressure they can put on you defensively, and at the same time really push the ball offensively and spread you out and wear you down with Chris Paul and James Harden. So, like I said, it's going to be a really interesting scenario on how things play out on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, they may never take a mid-range shot again. Aimee, what are your thoughts about Houston this year?
I think that they are going to be fun to watch, I guess. From a basketball fan perspective, not necessarily because I'm a Houston Rockets fan. I agree with Dan about Chris Paul being the dirtiest player in the league, and what is going to happen when Chris Paul needs the ball in his hands. James Harden pretty much wants the ball in his hands all the time. So that's like a lot of people got really excited about that, as if they were trying to form their own little super team to play against the Warriors. And I think you're right; they are going to win a lot of games, and they're probably going to be kind of fun to watch. I don't know that I think that Chris Paul and James Harden are going to work as well together on a team as some people are projecting that they will. They'll be good, but I don't really, like Dan said, I don't really see a way around trying to figure out what to do with, obviously they can't both have the ball at the same time. So, somebody's going to have to make something happen. And I mean, I could be wrong. They could play really well together and, could totally own the whole league, but I don't think I am. So
I think this could be a team that's really good in the regular season, but once they get into a series, I think it could be harder for them, because whatever ends up developing as the chemistry and the style of play between Harden and Paul, I think it's going to be pretty unique and pretty specific. And I think when teams get to play them for several games in a row, I think they'll be able to pick it apart. They just kind of strike me as a team that will have a successful regular season, but might struggle in the playoffs. And it goes along with what you were saying, Dan, about Chris Paul struggling to make it out of the playoffs, deep into the playoffs. We got anything else to say about Houston before we move on to the Spurs?
I wish nothing but bad things upon them.
On who?
Houston. As much as I despise the Lakers, I think the team that I currently hate the most in the NBA is the Rockets. I don't know why, I just do. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Pringles, man, and Daryl Morey. I like what he's done as far as really embracing analytics. It's just something about that franchise. I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that the Clyde spurned the Blazers for him. And I don't know. It's just something inherent that's just... I see those uniforms and I instantly just get angry. That's just weird.
Well, let's move on to the most
blasé of franchises.
Drab uniforms in the league. I don't think there's anything more drab than the gray Spurs jerseys. Let's talk about the Spurs, the team who takes everything I love. They are, last year were 61-21. They finished second in the Western Conference. This coming season, they're projected to win 52. So that's a dramatic drop. I want to talk about that in a sec. They've lost Joel Anthony, Dwayne Dedmon, David Lee, and Jonathan Simmons. They've added Matt Costello, Rudy Gay, Darren Hilliard, Jeffrey Laverne. Is that how you say his name?
Jeffrey Laverne, correct.
Joffrey Laverne, Brandon Paul, London Parates, and Derek White. I'm really surprised that they're being projected going from 61 wins last year to 52 wins this year. That seems like a precipitous drop for the Spurs, and I would definitely take the over on this one. What do you all think?
Oh my God, they're projected to win only 53 games? Dear God, the sky is falling.
We should have such bad problems.
They've
right?
won over 50 games for the last 20 years. Or
100 years.
I mean, literally, if you look at their winning percentage, I think, what is it? I want to say it's above. I think it's above 65% since the Tim Duncan era, or the year before the Tim Duncan era. No, because they were absolute crap.
That 1 year they tanked?
To get Tim Duncan. So for basically 20 years, they have won 50 games, and then obviously you've got the strike seasons in there, the shortened seasons in there. But they won like 65% of the games. It's a ridiculous number. People want to talk about, oh, the Patriots have been so dominant. The Spurs have done it for longer. That's the crazy thing here. So, I mean, you've got the second best player in the league, at least in my eyes, in Kawhi Leonard. You can make obviously an argument for Durant being there. For me, it's still LeBron's still number one. So, I mean, when you've got Kawhi Leonard and you've got other pieces around him, they're still going to be a very, very good team. I'm higher, obviously, on LaMarcus Aldridge than 99% of the known world, apparently. I still love LA. I still think he can get it done. Parker's on his last legs. There's no doubt about that. Same can be said of Manu. We're getting to the point where it's easier to find, bald spots on Manu than it is to find hair. Patty Mills is the best backup point guard in the NBA. As far as that sits right now, and really, he could probably make a case for being a starting point guard at this point in his career. He's better than Tony Parker is. Adding Rudy Gay, if Rudy Gay can come back from an Achilles injury, which pretty much no one in NBA history has, and people can make the argument for Kobe, he didn't come back, folks. That was a shell of Kobe Bryant. Wes Matthews has not come back. Elton Brand didn't come back. That injury, that ruptured, blown, whatever you want to call it, Achilles tendon is just a breaker of souls and dreams, particularly in the NBA. But if somehow he can come back and magically have that explosive athleticism and the ability to create for himself, which is something, while the Spurs are the Spursian team and moving the ball, that's all great. In the playoffs, though, you got to be able to take somebody off a bounce from time to time, and Rudy Gay can do that. So adding that to their team is huge. Losing Simmons and Dwayne Dedmon, I think both of those hurt this team. I don't know if adding Rudy Gay and Joffrey Laverne are enough to compensate for losing both those guys. Beyond that, one of those guys, those rookies they drafted, will somehow be an all-star in the next 2 years because that's the Spurs. But I mean, it's the Spurs. I mean, that's really what we're getting down to. You've got two guys for certain that are going to join Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker as first ballot Hall of Famers. Kawhi continues this career arc. He's going to be right there. LaMarcus is a great second banana. And you've got some great players around him. So, it'll be fun to see if this is the year the Spurs fall behind. Everybody
and only win 53.
Yeah, everybody wants to be that guy. I called it. I'm like, okay, let's go back to your Twitter or Facebook, social media history, and how many times did you call it before where you got it wrong? It's gotten to the point where if you look on social media now, people are like, so what do you think about the Spurs? Like, it's at least 55 wins. But they lost. I don't care. I've spent the last 12 years questioning this. I'm just going with it until it happens. Then once it happens, then we can talk.
God, I think that's probably the best philosophy to take right there, what Dan just said. Rudy Gay can play well. He was in Memphis for a while before he did the Toronto and then the Kings and then now to the Spurs. The Spurs are they're the team that I don't know what it is, and maybe it's that Kawhi Leonard started to kind of come up as Tim Duncan sort of faded out. He's a fantastic basketball player, and it really seems like with Greg Popovich, you just hand him a bench full of players and go, here Pop, make this happen, and he will, and he'll still come out and win 55 games. So
Bleacher Report nailed it. The Spurs are the freaking White Walkers.
They are.
They just keep coming. They're just hordes that just keep coming and coming and coming. And then finally they get to the freaking wall and you're like, they're not going to do anything this year. And they just burn it all to the ground. It's like, wait, what? Yeah. How did you? I'm done. Stop. I'm done trying. Seriously, you get to a point where you're done questioning them.
Yeah. I don't bet against the Spurs. I was very happy the times that the Grizzlies have beat the Spurs in the last few years, because that has been kind of the thorn in their side, and I think some of that had been mental too. There was one game. It was a triple overtime.
Oh wow!
Oh my God! And Memphis won, and it was probably one of the most stressful basketball games I have ever watched in my entire life. I remember making a joke in like the 50 millionth overtime or something to my husband, because it was a early December game. I said, all I want for Christmas is the head of Manu Ginobili on a platter. And so that year for Christmas, to his credit, he in a package of knitting needles that he got for me, he took a cutout and like printed out a picture of Manu Ginobili's head and stuck it in the envelope somewhere. Like the Spurs are the team that just like steals everybody's soul and everybody's joy, and they're not flashy like the Warriors are, but I mean, they've got an insane amount of talent and a coach that can absolutely make the most out of all of it. So, I don't think, like, I'm not ever going to be one of the people that says, oh, this is going to be the year that the Spurs finally drop off. I don't know that's ever going to happen. I'm just going to wait and not call that.
Well, maybe. I mean, I'm looking at their depth chart right now. Listed at power forward, they have LaMarcus and Rudy Gay. That's it. Listed at center, they have Pau Gasol and Joffrey Laverne. That's all they have listed in those two key positions. They've got Dejounte Murray, who's excellent, but extremely young, listed as their starting point guard. And I don't know if they want to do that because they want to have the strength of Patty Mills coming off the bench. I don't know. We can't just, I guess part of it is the Spurs have been so excellent for so long. I guess we have to watch falling into the trap of just expecting that they're going to be great and then, not going after the ball. But then you have Noah Vonleh, who's like, wait, the game's not over yet. And he picks up the ball and puts it in for the win, So we can't just assume that that they're just going to win everything. I think anybody has a chance on any day, partly because they are aging. Some of their best players are getting up there in the years. Anybody has a chance. So I'm not ready to just write them off as the number 2 automatically in the league, where a lot of people are saying. I think it is possible, and I think on any given day, if teams are paying attention, they could come through and surprise the Spurs. But yeah, it's hard.
There's 3 things in life for me: the sun rises in the east, it sets in the west, and the Spurs win 55 games. I mean, that's really what... There are literally people who are going to be listening to this, and readers and commenters, who have not been alive long enough to have seen a Spurs team not win 60% of their games. I mean, 20-year-olds have not seen this happen. That's how crazy this team has been for this run. So unless if something changes drastically, and I would never wish an injury on somebody, but unless... like something seriously bad happens to Kawhi, I just don't see this team falling off the wagon until, Pop leaves, Kawhi leaves, or it's just Kawhi left. I mean, hell, even then he may get him to 50. I mean, he's that good of a player. So it's just... It's crazy what they've done, and to continue with Dejounte Murray's another guy. You kind of brought him up there at tail end, who I overlooked, who came out of nowhere last year, and that's kind of been the Spurs' way. So if Murray all of a sudden begins a Kawhi-like transformation where, he was a 15th pick from San Diego State, and Murray comes out and all of a sudden is a late first and becomes a superstar player, then you've got to really question if the Spurs have something in the water.
Well, it all goes back to when Manu got bit by the bat. But I've been forbidden for talking about that anymore because people seem to think that their vampires aren't real. We all know they are. I think we better wind it up here. We had a lot to cover, and I want to thank Aimee for joining us today. Any last words on how the Southwest is going to play out?
I honestly, I think we'll see the Spurs and the Rockets are going to win a bunch of games. The Grizzlies will hopefully win more than 34 games. The Pelicans are still going to be the misshapen Mr. Potato Head. I don't even know what to say about the Mavericks other than I don't think they did enough. I mean, they could probably get better. Like, maybe they could make the playoffs. I don't think they do. So I think that the Southwest Conference is going to stay, at least as far as team rankings. The win percentage, like win-loss ratios may change, but I think it's still going to be the Rockets and the Spurs are going to be dominant, and then hopefully the Grizzlies aren't going to be awful, but there is that chance. So, the Spurs will be the division champions again. Whatever.
Well, the Trailblazer fans recently have been through, some big changes. A couple years ago, we had a lot of turnover, and we all made it through. It ended up being a more fun year than a lot of us thought it would be. So, that's what I can wish for Memphis fans, is that feeling kind of low right now, but maybe someone will step up. Somebody will show that they're more than people thought they were, and it'll turn out to be better than you thought it was going to be. Dan, you want to take us out of here?
Absolutely. Aimee, you go ahead and give Aimee an opportunity here to go ahead and let people know where they can find her.
You can find our work at www.allheartinhoopcity.com, and you can find me on Twitter at HoopCityHellcat.
Awesome. Tara, go ahead and let them know where they can find you.
I am at TCB Biggs on Twitter.
As always, for Dan Meringue, that would be me. You can find me on Twitter at DMeringue. Wow, I almost said also because I had the other stuff to plug, but I don't have that anymore. Yay!
Do you have a secret account, Dan?
Oh, my burner accounts?
Secret Dan Twitter?
Oh, I almost let out the burner accounts. Yikes.
Oh, now I know what I'm doing tonight. I'm looking for Dan's burner account.
Yikes.
Dan is Kevin.
If anything, I'm going to be out here standing for Myers Leonard. That's who it's going to be for. But just remember, you can find us on iTunes, on Stitcher, all your podcast needs as part of the Almighty Baller Podcast Network, also part of the SB Nation network of podcasts. For Aimee, for Tara, I'm Dan Meringue. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.